to do.
Well,
Like,
I mean, that was going to be a big one of my points, excitement, because for example, and we're going to get into it in a minute. Don't get me wrong. Jeff Jarrett's
yeah,
over here doing like promo stuff. Doing the rounds. Like we knew that last week, and that's clearly continued into this week. Posters are starting to pop up. On the tube and stuff. I think a couple of people sent us pictures today. That's interesting. You're seeing who's on what poster type of thing, like the one I saw today, like Sting, Christian, Saraya, I think Jericho was on there. There's a bit of a weird cast of characters, Darby, Luchasaurus as well. So it's like one of them, a good mix of like, your so-called casual fan might go past on the tube and go, hang on, is that Sting? Oh, is that Chris Jericho? And then maybe, follow up. So they're doing all the promotional stuff to kind of, get things going and get people excited. But that's the biggest bit of feedback we've kind of had from the YouTube video we did on Friday, where we, did our Dynamite review. And really, we reviewed Dynamite in about 30 seconds because there was nothing to talk about. What was to talk about was the lack of anything All In.
Yeah.
And there's a palpable feeling, I think, from the majority of the responses we got. And again, we're talking hardcore fan circles, so you gotta take that into account. But there's just a general feeling of wanting to be excited about All In and kind of wanting just a bit more information to be excited about All In. Because I think there's a real fear starting, and it's all well and good for the Americans to pat us on the head and go, it'll be fine. Tony Khan always pulls it out of his arse. You can even make the argument. I heard Voices of Wrestling make it. Their audio on this was very good, but they were talking about how this is just there's probably a spreadsheet Mookie Garner has somewhere that he keeps that explains why, in marketing terms, why you sell a lot of tickets at the start when you first announce something, and then you big push at the very end. And that's work for them can't be underestimated. We didn't really say it when we saw it on Friday, but it's got to be said that does generally work for them. The pay-per-views do amazing numbers. They mostly do good from attendance. There's a clear business strategy at play as to why it feels like this is going to all be left there very last minute. But I think what gets missed by that is just, it's pro wrestling. So, of course, you can use your week-to-week TV to, as well as sell a load of tickets, that last lot of tickets in the last week, generate the buzz and excitement that's going to help you and rise all ships and get things going, from a TV point of view, from a ticket sales point of view, but just from a general excitement level. And that's the thing that I think is missing. That's the most bit of feedback that I'm seeing from the people who've bought tickets. Like, people in our YouTube comments are like, I paid, 300 quid for me hotel and ticket, and transport was another 100 on top of it, expecting a gigantic, biggest wrestling show of all time. Loads of stories like that. And people are starting to get worried. I've heard this multiple times now. Be like, I'm a bit worried that this is going to turn into being like one of those UK only. It's going to be like a Mayhem in Manchester, or a Capital Carnage, or a One Night Only, which is remembered well, but isn't the most important of cards on a worldwide basis. And people are just getting a little bit nervous because WWE have done that to us before. WWE have done that.
Yeah.
Have had big shows that they've advertised. We'll go all the way back to Royal, the Battle Royal at the Royal Albert Hall. That one, that level type of event where it's like, oh, pat them on the head. This is good for the Brits. But this is a $50 pay-per-view. The $60 pay-per-view that's coming the week after All Out in Chicago is actually the important one. I think we're all just looking for that reassurance that that's not going to be the case. And even with Collision, as much as I'm going to rave about Collision in a minute, because I fucking love that show, I still came out of it going, fuck, we still know nothing,
Yeah. We still know absolutely nothing about it. Like, as something to reiterate from what we said before, this is the biggest show that they're ever going to do. They're not going to do this. They're not going to be doing 2 nights of this as well. And like, they're not. This is the biggest show they're ever going to do, because this is the thing that sets the impression in people's mind that wrestling is not just WWE, and there is another company that can do it on this whole other level, like this whole other level of spectacle, and therefore the card should match it. It is like, this is infinitely more important than All Out. Like, I find any notions of holding stuff back for that laughable. Stuff that comes out of this, fine. Stuff that's held off, like in terms of like undercard stuff to go on to All Out, yeah, fine, whatever. But this should really be the focus. And the person who said the most about this is CM Punk. you know,
He's
which
done it because he's maybe not watched us, but he's watched YouTube videos like us,
yes,
moaning about the lack of announcements and moaning. I mean, there is no wrestler more tuned in to the discourse than CM Punk. Like he's seen the moaning and the fact that the Dynamite went by with barely a mention of Wembley, and then he was like, "Well, I'll babyface myself by mentioning it in my promo." But then still, it was an entire show that went by with
yeah,
very little mention of Wembley. I've seen Carl says here, so just say fucking and do a mystery show. I've heard that argument from Bully Ray. I'm not having that one. This needs to be the A show and All Out needs to be the B
yeah,
show, and hopefully that will still be the case. But like, I think we need some reassurance. I think we really, because another point someone made to us, because
mm,
again, we had our initial rant, but like to follow up, like I had Phil Jones in me replies, and he was saying like, and I hadn't even thought about this like until he said it. If you're gonna leave all your build to the last minute, let's say Moxley Kingston's a match, and we've got to make for Kingston to get back from the G1. Let's say Ospreay is doing something important, whether it's the Jericho match, whether it's the Kenny match, I would much prefer, but it doesn't feel like that's coming. If they do all that on the last Dynamite or this last Collision that week where they're taping them both on the Wednesday, Dynamite will barely air in the UK before Wembley on the Sunday, and Collision won't. Collision won't be on telly until after the pay-per-view has already happened. So your biggest shot window for selling this pay-per-view and for all the talk about selling those tickets last minute is kind of gone. So you can't do that practically. Like
no.
it has to be now, and it feels like it's not going to be.
And that double taping in Georgia feels like that's a show where they'll be wrapping loads of stuff in it, which the dynamic, because you'll have all the main players in place, won't you? We won't get the I'd love to think that somehow they'll end with some sort of Kenny Omega CM Punk showdown in the middle of the
Yeah.
ring or something like that, because that would be kind of incredible. But I just don't think that's going to be happening. I've got other strong thoughts on that. But it just adds. It's just an overwhelming. Like I'm just more baffled. I'm like, everyone in this company should be buzzing about this show. Everyone. The wrestlers should be busting a gut to be on there in the most prominent positions possible. Tony Khan should be going, this is the thing that I go to advertisers and potential media partners and I show them this show. This is the show that really makes us. Not just an arena in the US, Wembley fucking Stadium, which is famous. It's really fucking famous and very hard to sell out. Not everyone does that in there as well. Here we go. Is this an Andrade on there? What has he said?
Yes. So Andrade's gone on Twitter tonight to book. He's done a CM Punk. He's calling his own shot here. I want the next one. I would like to see it all in. Presumably talking to Tommy Bell and Malachi Black for Mexico versus the Netherlands. So there we go. There's Andrade just doing his own thing.
Why not?
Love it.
Why not? No
That's
one
a
else
good match.
is.
Good match.
No, like, I mean, again, if you were going to fantasy book this, it's like this should have, as we said before, big matchups and stuff like what is going to be the stuff that sells. I happen to think that they are going to end up doing Punk versus MJF. I think we had like the hint being there for it, and not having the heel turn on Collision and stuff like that made me think that's the direction they're going to drag that out, and it'll be
That's the one bit
face
that made me
MJF
more
versus heel Punk. And I was like, ending the show absolutely makes a lot of sense. Your biggest star against your biggest up and coming star, like that makes complete sense. What you should have with the other stuff on there, like, and that feels to me like a proper main event, like a world title main event, like, and you can play on it, but also at the same time, you should have Ospreay Omega to try and put on, like, finish the trilogy of what is seen as like one of the best, sets of trilogies of possibly of all time. Certainly within like, kind of calendar year. What a place to end it. I'm sure Will Ospreay would want that kind of prominence. It makes sense. It's something that they've promoted on pay-per-view. We spoke about Sting retirement matches. If you're not going to do it here, then where are you going to do it? Chicago? Why? Because you like Chicago. Great. You're not going to do, it's not going to mean anything in the scheme of things. It's just like it's the spectacle and it's the impression, but it just seems to be people should be busting a gut in this to say, I want on this show and I want on in a big prominent match. And the stuff we're hearing is almost like there's a kind of like wariness to it, and like people don't really know. And that was meant to be Vince shit. Vince was meant to be the one who didn't have a fucking clue. And then you look at the bill to SummerSlam, and they're doing, they're going to do near 50,000 on the day. They're at
Mm.
Ford Field, one of their, which they're doing now on the reg, and they're selling more tickets because they're getting their shit into fucking, they're getting their shit into gear over there, which means you have
It's
to, that Vince advantage, we thought it may come back into play, but it really isn't with them. And they're
it seems
losing this impression.
yeah. Seems obvious because you don't want to tell them to learn a lesson from WWE because it's fucking WWE. But like this, the last thing I'll say on that point of view is this should be AEW's WrestleMania. We've said it a million times. Right now, it's feeling like it's going to be AEW's one night only or Capital. I don't know. I can't decide which. Maybe Rebellion, the UK pay per view. Maybe it's more like that. It's feeling like it might be one of those lines. But it should be your WrestleMania. It should be the biggest show of the year. And again, not even just talking about it from a ticket sales point of view, I think is important. You want to, and they probably will, and they should deserve a lot of credit for this, have the biggest wrestling attendance that has ever happened outside of people being forced by gunpoint to go to a show. Like that is most likely going to be the case. So like all of these things are true. This is potentially the biggest show ever. And I just think, like I say, that rising tide can pull up, can rise all chips because you look at like Dynamite last week, which we're not going to waste any time talking about a second time, but like that felt like such a nothing show. The one thing, and they don't always get it right, recent years especially, but like you could always rely on WWE, but like the shit all year round, and then the 4 weeks leading into WrestleMania. There was a point where Raw was appointment television. I know that sounds like it was a long time ago, but there was because important shit was happening, and there was a boost in the ratings because there was important shit happening leading up to Mania, and that's why last week's Dynamite is so unforgivable because we should be in that period now for AEW where every show is important because fucking hell, Wembley's coming. I said it on the weekend show. It should be the Pucci effect. Everyone should be mentioning Wembley at every given moment. It should be plastered everywhere. And we're just not getting that. The only person that's given us any promotion for it, JP, is our mate Double J. He's over in the UK. He's shooting his own angles like Andrade. He's trying to get things going. Like that's it. Though he's a one-man promotional
God
unit at
love
the
it.
minute.
And he should absolutely be on the getting an entrance at Wembley during the Battle Royal that they inevitably do, where hopefully all those people you want to give a vote, that's where you throw them. Yeah, it's where you put them in there. But yeah, he twatted Grado, didn't he, with the guitar was it on Hawksby and Jacobs? Was it?
Yeah. Apparently, see, Grado was shooting a shot. Grado's it was on Talksport
Spares me from
trying
talking
to
shit
get
about Arsenal, as they normally fucking do.
I felt the only bad bit was I laughed then, but the guys who were hosting it did end up laughing rather than selling the severity of Grado getting hit over the head with a guitar. But genuinely, there's Jeff fucking his own angle there, like because Grado literally was like, "Oh, I'd love to do Wembley." I'm sure every wrestler would. No wrestler's gonna say no, are they? But I don't know. Like the ironic part of me would enjoy that at Wembley, but like it could be. I could see that being something progress book on the weekend, or like it ends up being like because Jeff's got the connections and whatever, or it ends up being like for the TNA tour covered up. But maybe laugh that even Jeff, he's on radio, he's doing all the promotion for the show, and he's building his own match with Grado now rather than anything we can actually tell you about the card. It's just brilliant.
And that's it. It's like it's like selling a pay-per-view, which sometimes it's like, well, I don't want to be sold something. It's like I want to feel excited about this because there's a lot that we've all kind of invested into this, and you're hoping it boosts wrestling popularity in this country, where it's actually thought of as like this is a big deal, and that it's the kind of thing that ITV would take seriously, and then that would lead to benefiting all manner of wrestling around the UK and other things like that, and into Europe. But that doesn't appear, I don't know, either it's not the priority, because like it's still feeling like this story is brilliant in Tony Khan's head. And it's that thing that everyone says. It's just like, and he'll explain it. And I'm sure the subtlety that we had on Collision, I don't doubt that's going to play into it. But sometimes you need shit to actually happen, rather than like kind of what is really, I said plot progression. It's character development. Well,
Mm.
we're kind of at the point we need the plot to move on. We need actual events to start taking place that leads to your biggest show of all time. It should be the thing that focuses the mind. And the
Yeah.
rumors of the matches, and we spoke about them before, like, I mean, the more I think of them, the more awful I think they
Mm.
are. Like, yeah, it'll be a pop for an entrance, but the match will, I don't see stuff that lives long in the memory. The
Mm.
idea that the EVPs of the company are wanting to do a match with the Dark Order, I think speaks volumes
Oh, that's
to
not
what.
happening. No way. No way. I
No,
know they're doing a stupid
they should be
six-man
coming
with
out challenging FTR.
yeah. I
Like,
mean, that's got to be the match. I mean,
otherwise, why are they there?
this has been the thing. It's like I do. I asked, do you feel better after Collision this weekend? I do in some ways because I think
Mm,
up until Collision, it wasn't even like so much about we want matches announced on paper. We would like that, but like you also want to have things that are hinted, like you're saying there, that you're excited about. You know, think that you're like, okay, this is the direction it feels like they're going, so I'm excited. I think FTR and Bucks is one of them. I just don't think it's a coincidence that FTR mentioned the Bucks in the promo a couple of weeks ago. I think you can read a couple of things into what Punk was saying in his promo about,
mm.
being the grown up in the room and, people having to do things they don't want to do. I was wondering if that was on the Bucks. I suppose it could be about MJF himself. But I feel a little bit more comfortable, like fancy booking, like coming out of Collision. Like if we
Yeah.
talk that, like I think the main things coming out of Collision were the Punk and Ricky Starks promo. So that was another one. The fact that their
Mm,
match is now happening on next week's Collision, and God help them because it's head to head with SummerSlam. But I was like, okay, cool. That takes one out the mix because there was a lot of talk, a lot of fancy book cards that had Punk versus Ricky Starks. Maybe in Chicago, not on your fucking stadium show. And then Punk, being Punk, like we said, went out there. He's read all the dirt sheets. He's watched all the YouTube videos. He's listened to all the audio. He knows everyone's whining about Wembley. So it felt like he actually hit fast forward on this MJF program. Because like I found it very interesting that like he's had this little red bag that he's carrying around. And then it got kind of forgotten about, didn't it? Like, it's not like the entire run of Collision, he's been saying he's the real world's champion. It was almost like, fuck, we've got to start doing stuff. So I'll say I'm the real world's champion today. But then you had the unfortunate kind of problem that he did it on the night that MJF was in the building. And MJF didn't seem to care. MJF was still doing his buddy stuff with Adam Cole. So it feels like something got a little bit lost in translation there. But it feels like, yeah, you say we got the bones of something going there.
mm.
And I have to believe with all my heart, and I just have to believe it at this point. Otherwise, I'll cry. Punk MJF is your big Wembley match. And if that is the case, I feel like we set things in motion well enough on Collision with that Punk promo and all of the Ricky Stark stuff.
Yeah, we did. I was very relieved when I saw that the Starks match was happening, and then the turn didn't happen. I was like, okay, that's fine because it writes MJF out of the tag division, whilst also at the same time. And it's not for me, but people enjoy Adam Cole and MJF, and it can't be denied. Like you can't. So in a sense,
I'll turn the corner right now. I think I'm into it. Sorry.
I don't like the skits. However, if this is then MJF is going to have to go in there with like CM Punk and stuff. I think there's like that's a much more like kind of proper main event. With big kind of entrances and other stuff like that.
Two main eventers wrestling each other. That's all we
Two
want.
main eventers. Yeah.
I don't want a card full of main eventers wrestling people who are just a bit below them on the card. You know what I mean? Like that's a nice
one
little
or two of those.
Yeah. Yeah, to support the big grown up matches up on top happening. And that's what I was worried about.